Hello, welcome to episode 80 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by Chitty's Cheesesteaks. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, joined by MMO editor Chris Bello. Chris, thanks so much for taking some time tonight, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, and I'm excited to talk Mets baseball.
Absolutely, absolutely. And with that, as we're recording here, JD Martinez has made his debut for the Mets. As it stands now, he got a hit in his first at bat. But the man is here. The protection behind Pete Alonso, that DH the Mets have kind of been longing for, which seems like the last few years. The man is here. Just want to get your thoughts, reactions to kind of him joining the big league club now, and just kind of, thoughts on the offense now with him here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge addition to the Mets lineup. Before JD even came here, the Mets were already rolling on offense. And over the last 15 days, I think they're tied in the majors right now with 75 runs scored, obviously before tonight's game. So another addition to this Mets lineup. It'll give Pete Alonso another bat behind him, which if you go back and look at the guys hitting behind Alonso his whole career, we're talking Robinson, Cano, maybe Dominic Smith. Not a lot of great names. So JD Martinez gives the Mets that bat to finally protect Pete Alonso.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike and I have talked on the show before that, after the Mets did sign JD, that this would be the best protection Speed ever had. So you hit the nail on the head there. Outside of that, I'm just curious what you think as far as like what he can bring to the ball club, just like with his, they talked on Apple TV today, just like he's almost a second hitting coach. They called him a journeyman, which I disagree with. Someone with his production and his kind of career, I wouldn't, call a journeyman. Someone who's played a long time, sure, but he's been productive and a great hitter for a while. But I just want to get your thoughts with his kind of presence, now kind of in the Mets clubhouse and how it can maybe affect some of these younger guys.
Yeah, I mean, journeyman's definitely a weird way to put it. Obviously started with the Astros, then bounced to the Tigers. But once he got to the Tigers, really solidified himself. But we saw earlier in the offseason when he did sign that he was helping Vientos a little bit because they had the same either offseason plan or they were together. So it'll definitely be another presence. You know that earlier in his career, he got some help from Miguel Cabrera. So maybe he can bring that over to the Mets. But again, a solid bat in that lineup, number 5 overall. And you hope that he's able to rub off on guys like Mark Vientos when he eventually comes up. Maybe a Francisco Alvarez, a right-handed bat. Maybe even Brett Beatty, who we've seen struggle a little bit, which we'll get to later. But hopefully that offensive presence is able to rub off and finally take some pressure even off guys like Lindor and Alonso, who have been struggling earlier on in the season with runners in scoring position.
Yeah, you mentioned that as far as, the Mets really have been clicking the last couple of weeks as far as with the offense. Without a JD Martinez, like you mentioned too, Lindor and Alonso really kind of struggling pretty mightily with runners in scoring position. Brett Beatty started off well, but really hasn't hit his, has kind of, hit a funk here, which you mentioned we'll get to. And you mentioned Alvarez kind of benefiting from Martinez especially. I wonder now with this injury, how much that'll take away from it. Hopefully, I don't know how much is going to be around the clubhouse and kind of all that with the rehab and everything, but you hope that, Alvarez can learn as much as possible for someone like a JD Martinez could probably help someone like him immensely.
Yeah, and Francisco Alvarez last season had not only a great season, but a historic one in terms of when you compared him and his home runs to Johnny Bench. But
Sure.
just the approach, he did have a low on base percentage under 300. So hopefully maybe JD Martinez can get Alvarez to not change his approach, but be a little bit more consistent getting on base, really tuning into that power and it being more consistent because it was a little bit of an every other month with Alvarez where you had the hot month, then the cold month. So you really hope that JD Martinez can help out with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You want to see Alvarez take that next step to be a kind of polished all around hitter. I just, you worry now at this point just how those 8 weeks will affect him, take him off track. Hopefully it's not too much. Obviously you want the Mets to make the playoffs, but the biggest thing is just production or maturation of these young guys. So, you hope that Alvarez can get back healthy. And, like we said, it sucks to have him on the shelf for 8 weeks. It's nothing you don't want, but he wasn't particularly off to the hottest start, offensively. And the rest of the offense was kind of, carrying the load. So, even without him now with JD Martinez back, you hope that, things could still kind of level out, so to speak, even when, missing Alvarez and with, Navarez and Nito going to take the bulk of the catching now. Hopefully it won't be too much of a hole in the lineup. Someone like Martinez can kind of fill that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also Funny enough, Alvarez goes down. You get the offense from Narvaez. Tomas Nido hit a home run in tonight's game. So you're getting it almost from everywhere but the guys you expect. Harrison Bader, Tyrone Taylor's been amazing so far. Brandon Nimmo's still hitting under 200. So hopefully JD Martinez is that great connector from the first half of the lineup, which should start hitting soon, over into that bottom half, which has really carried the weight for the Mets early on in this season.
Yeah, definitely. And that, I think, is a good transition, specifically talking about Francisco Lindor. Obviously, really not a good start to the year. You mentioned his struggles with runners in scoring position. The last week or so has seemed to pick it up, at least from the left side. Just want to get your thoughts from the road trip. Few home runs from the left side, like I said, seems to be taking better swings and at least taking better takes, better approach. Just want to get your thoughts on kind of Lindor's struggles here to start the year.
Well, the 3 home runs that he hit on the West Coast trip, absolutely huge. All 3 were from the left-handed side.
Mm-hmm.
He came off that road trip where he was slashing 375, 400, 792. And it kind of killed that rumor, or not rumor, I should say, but the narrative we saw on Mets Twitter where for some reason everyone was saying Lindor should only bat from the right side. I was reading a lot about that over the weekend, and this is an all-star level shortstop. We knew the offense was going to come. He's had 100 RBIs at 98 with the Mets. He's perennially been a over 100 OPS plus guy his entire career offensively. You knew the bounce back was going to happen. So when you saw those 3 home runs from the left-handed side, at least for me as a Mets fan, you kind of relieved yourself a little bit. You're like, oof, okay, we're good. He's coming back. So you were never really worrying about Lindor, in my opinion. It was just frustrating to see the struggles with the 0-5 start.
Yeah, and I didn't really see as much people saying that you only hit from the right side. I mean, he's a very good switch hitting shortstop. We know he gets started from the left side, takes him longer. Also, someone notoriously gets off to a slow start to start the year. I think my gripe more than anything, you can tell me how you feel. I just felt it, and still kind of at points, I don't think they should be afraid to drop him down the lineup. I think that's something that's okay. He doesn't have to hit 3 consistently, especially the way he was struggling. I think it's okay if he, you moved him down to the 5 or to the 6 hole, something like that, just to get him right. Maybe see some more fastballs. I don't know how you feel about that. But more so than anything, I just felt like with his struggles, it was kind of daunting to see him batting third every day, and felt like, I don't know if it's the contract, whatever it is, right? You want to hit him in the lineup every day where he is, but I don't see dropping him in the lineup a little bit wouldn't be the worst thing either.
Yeah, dropping him, I think it's a fair conversation to have, just because coming into today, I believe he was 3 for 23 with runners in scoring position.
Sure.
But with him and Alonso combined, they were 6 for 44. So I totally get that conversation. To me, I'm no expert. I'm not a batting coach, but it looks like he's pressing sometimes. And I think when you listen to Lindor talk to the media, and when you hear the discussions about Carlos Mendoza with SNY, mm-hmm. you can tell that when the fans gave him the ovation, it kind of relieved, he took a deep breath and said, okay, this is my fan base. And sure. It looks like he's pressing either to get the run in, help the team win. Maybe it's a little bit of the fans. I don't know how much we actually are a part of it, but he said it was a huge deal. So dropping him in the lineup, that question, I don't know if I would drop him in the lineup. It kind of reminds me of the same conversation we had back in 2019 with Edwin Diaz. Do we let him close? And if this team is going to be successful, you need Lindor to hit third, and you need him to be a run producer. So it's kind of that same gripe. You could move him 6, but then who do you put third? Alonso, JD Martinez? I don't know. You could, but personally, sure. I wouldn't.
It's a hard thing, right? Because I could say even, Starling Marte, you could even put him in the 3 hole if you want. He's obviously had a good year. You want him in the top of the order pretty much no matter what at this point. But I could see him still sliding in the 3 hole if you want to put Lindor down. You can swap him McNeil really if you want to. I don't see that as a big deal between 3 and 6. If one's hotter than the other, obviously Lindor being a switch hitter, it gives you a little more options as far as pitching matchups. But I just, you wonder, like you said, being 3 for 23 at runners in scoring position, and same thing with Alonso, they're both struggling. But to me, no matter what, Alonso's your cleanup hitter. That's someone I think more than anything I would kind of leave the way the lineup is, and I would, be more apt, like I said, just to move Lindor down a little bit to take a little bit of the pressure off him. I think Alonso will turn it around. I think they both will. I just think, like you said, it seems like Lindor's pressing. He says that as much that he always tries to feels the pressure trying to drive a run in every time he's at the plate with runners in scoring position. So, I guess whatever they can kind of do to lighten that load and kind of get him going a little bit would be huge, especially with the way the offense is going with so many guys, off the slow starts, like you mentioned.
Yeah. And if you were going to switch around the lineup, I think personally what I would do is I'd maybe move Martinez and Lindor. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe put Lindor fifth or sixth and put Martinez third. But,
Mm-hmm.
McNeil for me grounds into a lot of double plays. It's a lot of weak contact sometimes. So if we're talking about 2021 or
Sure.
2022, Jeff McNeil, sure,
Sure.
bat him third. But right now, I wouldn't put him third.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I look at more at this point, whoever, if McNeil's swinging a better bat, which he seems like he's turned it around as well, at least has gotten things going. That's kind of just the way I look at it. But obviously, you want all these guys humming on all cylinders, and if you have Lindor doing what he does as a 30-30 guy, obviously you want him in the 3-hole. But you got to see him getting going. To another infielder, Brett Beatty. Just kind of want to talk about his struggles a bit. Obviously, started the year off well. Did really well driving in runners at home, the first homestand. But really kind of last couple of weeks, obviously, he had the hamstring thing that kept him out a little bit. But just seems like he's hit his first funk of the season. Pitchers have seemed to make adjustments on him. I just want to get your kind of thoughts there.
Yeah, so he was slashing 333, 385, 417 on April 8th. That's an 801 OPS. It looked like he had turned that corner, but you almost, when you were watching him hit and having that high average, you were still waiting for the exit velocities.
Mm-hmm.
He had the home run against the lefty. I believe it was Hobie Milner with the Brewers earlier on in the season. And you saw that and you thought to yourself, maybe Brett Beatty had figured it out. He came in with the confidence. The defense has been stellar so far, so you thought he'd maybe come to the plate, but he hasn't really made that adjustment yet to really drive the ball. And you're seeing now that average and that BABIP, which was pretty low earlier on in the season, is starting to dip into his real numbers. Now he's batting 205, and it's not great. You thought you'd make an adjustment. You thought he'd start driving the ball more, which we saw in AAA and AA, and it just hasn't trickled into the major leagues yet. So I think Brett Beatty's still a question mark offensively as of now.
Yeah, I agree, and that's kind of what I felt the whole time. To start this year, to see what happened when he got into his first funk, and see how pitchers adjusted to him, and see what he would, be able to adjust back. He hasn't done that so far, but that's kind of what this year is about. You give him another season to see what you kind of have, and you can adjust from there. You wish, hopefully, he can figure everything out. He seems to, especially defensively, have gotten better. So I give him a lot of credit there. I know he worked with Lindor in the offseason, kind of took on his fielding program, which seemed to really help. But it would be great to, see him become a much more consistent hitter. And who knows if that's going to happen or not. But this is a season where if you're going to give him 500, 600 at-bats to see really if you need to move on from him or, make a different direction at third base going forward for 25 and beyond. This is kind of the season, I guess, for him to do that. And hopefully he can kind of live up to the task here as they move forward.
Yeah, and he's only 24. So I don't think it's fair to give up on anybody yet.
Sure.
He's had the 500 plate appearances, I believe, last season or the year before that. So he's definitely had his chances. I would say that this is really the year where the Mets figure it out. Obviously, David Stern said it was the transition year. They were talking about signing Justin Turner before he ended up signing with Boston. So you knew that even though they knew they had internal options, they might not have given Brett Beatty that. And right now, athletically and defensively, he's staying in the lineup because there's not that many guys behind him. Joey Wendell could play third, maybe McNeil. Mark Vientos really wasn't that much of an offensive bat when he was up last year, and his defense at third isn't that great either. So I would say the defense and athleticism is really keeping him in, but yeah, there's no reason why the Mets wouldn't at least give him the year to try and figure it out offensively. And we know he's a great player. I mean, he had a 3.45 slash line in AAA, so you're almost just waiting for him to either recognize the big league pitching or make that one adjustment to where he can get back to the player he was, which was a 300 average, maybe 20 to 25 homer guy, and why he was a top 20 prospect in baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully he can get that confidence going. Like you said, you don't want to give up on somebody that young. But this is the seed, like you said, he got a full season of bats last year. So now this is really for the Mets to kind of see what they want to go moving forward, and hopefully he can make those adjustments, like you said. But kind of last thing here to round everything out, I do want to talk pitching, but in particular, minor league pitching. Christian Scott in particular, 20 innings pitched so far, 20.2 innings pitched this year. He's got 34 strikeouts. Sorry, the number kind of got away from me there. So 34 strikeouts and 20 and 2/3 inning pitched. He's got a whip of 0.7 right now, which is great. His strikeouts per 9 are at 8.5. Seems to, every time he takes the ball, seems to get more and more dominant at AAA. Just want to get your thoughts on him, what he's doing right now, and what, your guess of when you think he'll be making, a start for the big league club sooner than later.
Yeah, well, first of all, Christian Scott, what a great story. Just in case you don't know quickly, was a reliever in college at Florida. Mets draft him. They've now stretched him out over into a starter. And last season, if you were following along with the Christian Scott mania, I mean, it was insane. They gave him the rehab start in St. Lucie. Mm-hmm. Then he came up in Brooklyn, had a 2.28. Again. And then he went to AA and had a 2.47. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, Christian Scott, just what a great story. And now this year he starts in AAA. And like you said, absolutely dominating. And if you had to ask me when I think we could see him, it could be in less than a month. I mean, sure. The Mets starters haven't given a lot of length. The bullpen's getting overworked. They might extend to a 6-man rotation just to give guys like Sean Manaea and Luis Severino a little less mileage.
Sure.
So we could see him in 3 weeks, maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah, if he keeps doing what he's doing and shows that he has command of his secondary pitches the way he's kind of doing right now with this stretch of pitching, it would make sense. We know that the Mets starters aren't giving them any sort of length at all, and they're not going to be able to sustain that this year, despite the ERA and that sort of thing. So someone like Christian Scott, if he can come up and give them, I don't know, if he can give you 10 to 15 starts this year, maybe something like that. If he comes up within the next few weeks, like you're saying, that would be something not only, to help the Mets this season, but you'd be able to understand what you have for next year and beyond, as far as, potentially anchoring that rotation. I mean, 4 walks right now. And like I said, 20 and 2/3 innings pitched. You really like seeing that. 6 home runs. Don't love that, but obviously it's AAA. It's Syracuse. I don't know how the ball travels, that sort of thing. I don't know if you take that with a grain of salt, but that's, something that I think Mets fans should be excited about. And like you said, in the next few weeks, expecting to see him with the big league club making some starts here.
Well, yeah, that was what I was going to say. Your biggest gripe with Christian Scott was he had 6 homers. And if you go to Citi Field and you bring that kind of talent there with the strikeout potential, I do think you see the home runs dip down a little bit.
Sure. I know that they've talked about a little bit, obviously right now his stuff is crisp, but secondary command might be a little something he struggles with when he comes into the big league level. But again, if he's showing that he has the confidence at the AAA level and is making the Mets kind of force their hand, it's a good year for him to get his growing pains out too. Obviously they want to compete for a playoff spot and all that, but again, if you can get this guy up here and he can kind of work through some of those early on struggles, secondary command, things of that nature, and build that confidence, like I said, for, a bunch of starts here that can go into 25, it will go a long way for them.
Yeah. And we knew this year was going to be a transition year. And when you look at Dom Hamill, when you look at Christian Scott,
sure,
they've got a lot of arms coming up. So I truly do feel that, like you said, you give them 10 to 15 starts, and you really just let them continue to get mileage in the major leagues.
Yeah, and like you said, a 6-man rotation is probably great for everybody. Great for somebody like Scott, get their feet wet with not obviously having to be too daunting at the major league level, because we know, a lot of these pretty much all starters now at the minor level are, and their workload isn't made to be major league ready right away. So you would help him there, like you said, guys like Manaea, Quintana, Severino kind of get extra rest. Senga, when he eventually comes back, that would only help him as well. So it would be interesting to see once Scott gets up here, what they do to make that adjustment and try to hopefully get the most out of their starters and get like the most length out of their starters, whether it's a 6-man or whatever that they do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And and I think when you talk about the starters and the length that you're getting from
Hmm.
those starters, you knew that it was going to be a little iffy.
Sure.
You knew that Shamanaya as a starter in San Francisco wasn't really getting stretched out.
Right.
You also knew that Adrian Hauser wasn't really getting stretched out.
Sure.
So you knew it was going to be a problem. And you don't know if they're maybe going to bring up an arm like
Hmm.
Lucchesi at some point to give them
Hmm.
length. But yeah, I definitely think those starters really give you added on innings. And that's all you really need from the Mets right now. You need to get innings and you need the offense to really get going in this transition year. And that's something that we all talked about in the offseason. And I think now that you see the vision almost with the pitching and the defense, you know
Sure.
it's going to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Lucchesi. He'll definitely be making some starts this year. Listen, in baseball, we know now you need 6, 7, 8 starters as it is. And in the Mets case, they probably need more like 8 or 9 to get through this kind of year, especially if they want to stay competitive and not drain the bullpen out completely by July. I mean, we saw what happened. Last year was the other extreme with the starting pitching. Obviously, they got nothing out of anyone, and we know what happened. But any amount of extra back end starters, extra depth guys to get this rotation in a spot where hopefully guys aren't burned out by June, July, August. There, that would be great for them. But that's going to wrap everything up for this week. We'll catch you next week. Until then, hopefully it's a nice weekend for the Mets here. Good opening series for JD Martinez. But we'll catch you up with all that. And as always, let's go Mets.